Greetings ATA community, welcome back to my second channel. I often get comments and emails from ATA viewers asking a host of different questions, so I thought I would take the time to make a video to address many of those questions at once. I've compiled a list of questions that are repeatedly asked, as well as specific questions that were asked by my Patreon supporters. So without further ado, let's dive right in and answer some questions. So the first question is, why am I wearing this mask? The first thing I'd like to clarify is that I wear this mask to protect my identity, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the pandemic. Believe it or not, a lot of people out there have very strong opinions about ATA, so much so that I have received multiple threats to harm me or my family. I love creating content for ATA, but it is not more important to me than my family's safety, regardless of the legitimacy of these threats. Another reason is that I am simply not interested in being known to the public. I had no idea that ATA would grow to the scale that it has, and I never really considered all of the external responsibilities that come along with being a content creator. So the plan was never for me to be in the spotlight, so to speak. But of course, things have changed along the way with ATA, and I do feel that it's necessary to establish a relationship with my audience. The mask is simply a way to do that without exposing my identity to the public. Before I move on to the next topic, I would like to address a comment that was left on my previous video regarding this mask. A viewer named Javier Lopez left a comment that was mostly expressing his support of ATA, but he also mentions a sentiment that has been shared by many other viewers. In the comment, he states that he empathizes with people believing this mask is virtue signaling conservative ideologies. First, ATA is not associated with any political ideologies, and neither I or ATA has any relationship with anyone who promotes any political agenda, regardless of whether they are left, right, or center. Now, I know this may be a radical idea in American society today, but ATA will never create political content or be associated with any political ideology ever. I find it troubling that wearing the American flag led some to believe that it was attached to some kind of subliminal political message, and I reject the notion that this mask is inherently tied to conservative beliefs. The American flag is a representation of our country as a whole, and that includes any and all Americans, regardless of their political alignment. The American flag represents so much more than our political structure as a country, and I believe that attaching the imagery of an American flag to any particular ideology is both naive and short-sighted. To me, this mask represents all Americans, and before anyone mentions it in the comments, it is not a violation of any federal or state flag laws to wear this mask. Now, let's move on to the next question. One of the most common questions I'm asked is what resources I use to gather information about laws and case law. The truth is that there is no substitution for a foundation of knowledge and experience. There are a lot of resources available for anyone who wants to learn about our judicial system, but understanding the complex nature of that system requires more than any single website can offer. In order to fully grasp the context of any given police encounter, it would require years of reading case law and interpreting court opinions. And there's a reason why most attorneys specialize in one form of law or another. There are thousands of variables that could come into play during any police encounter, and each of those variables may call upon the logic and legal precedent of many different cases. Finding the resources to analyze a law or case isn't that difficult, and anyone with basic Google skills can find the laws of their state or any Supreme Court case. The most important thing to understand is that it will take time to learn and fully grasp any legal concept. But once you build a basic foundation of knowledge, all of the other information will fall into place. The next 4 questions come from a Patreon subscriber of mine named Atlas Velarde. The first question he asked is, why is there a distinct difference between the old ATA videos and the new ones in terms of narration? There is no distinct difference. I'm not really sure why anyone is under the impression that anything changed once the new narrator was brought in, but I still do everything I did for ATA before I hired the narrator. Nothing has changed about the format or the grading system. And to take a step back from this question, for those of you who don't know, I hired a narrator back in early 2020 to take over some of the workload while I underwent a small medical procedure. The narrator simply reads the scripts that I provide to him and does not contribute to ATA in any other way, shape, or form. In Atlas's next question, he asked, was someone else previously running the channel? The answer is no. I've always been the owner of ATA, and I always will be the owner of ATA. Next, he asks, am I a one-man show? The truth is that I was a one-man show until very recently. At the beginning of this year, it became clear that it was time to expand ATA. So I recently hired an assistant researcher to help me develop episodes. I will not reveal their identity, but they are an attorney, and they are well versed on civilian rights and a myriad of other legal topics. Right now, the researcher has been helping me write and locate certain information, but eventually I hope to create a team of vetted researchers to help expand ATA and bring even more content to the table for you all to enjoy. I've also been working on hiring an editor, but that's a slow process, and I'm not really sure when that'll pan out. The next few questions come from my Patreon supporter, Nithli. Nithli's first question is, something I'd like to see are follow-up situations that affected auditors or minor police misconduct. Major police misconduct ends up on mainstream news most of the time, but what about some of those false arrests that we see happening to auditors? I get a lot of requests to make a video that looks back at all of the interactions that didn't necessarily have a resolution and update the audience on the status of those cases. Unfortunately, that's not really something I have time for at the moment, as there are nearly 150 episodes of ATA, and it would take a very long time to compile all of that information. This is likely something I will look into doing in the future, and I plan to post update videos on this channel for any interactions on ATA moving forward. But with that said, you all have the resources available to you to follow up on these encounters yourself. Just take a look in the description section of any of ATA's videos. So if you really need to get an update, just look to the resources in the description section of the videos and it will lead you to the answers you're looking for. Next, Nithli asked if I was a cop at any point in time. I have never been a police officer, and I never intend to be a police officer. The next question comes from the Patreon supporter Don Lepechkis, and he asks, what are the most common misconceptions that auditors fall for? The most common misconception amongst auditors is just a general understanding of the Terry versus Ohio case, and that's why I cover that case so often on ATA. What most auditors fail to understand is that police officers do not need reasonable suspicion of a specific crime in order to detain an individual. The Terry case dictates that officers only need suspicion of criminal activity, not a specific crime. If you need more clarification on this, check out the main channel because, like I said, we discuss this a lot. The next question comes from the Patreon supporter Eric Fletcher, and he asks, how much time goes into making one episode of ATA, including watching videos, researching the applicable laws, scripting out your commentary, getting the audio recorded, compiling the video, and any other steps that he left out? It really depends on the episode. Some episodes can take weeks or months depending on the complexity of the topic or the information needed. If I have all the resources available to me, it generally takes about 20 to 40 hours depending on the video. The next few questions come from the Patreon supporter Irek, and he asks, what made you interested in auditing? Reviewing other people's audit. I've been aware of the auditing community for a very long time, and I've always wanted to do some kind of project that involved that community. Through my work as a journalist, I came back to the auditing community after covering Supreme Court cases for a publication I was working for at the time. As I got more into the field, I realized that the traditional news industry really wasn't for me, and many of their practices and expectations did not align with my moral compass or my mission as a journalist. I started looking for different ways to do the type of investigative work that I'm doing now. And after an encounter with a state trooper from my home state, the idea for ATA started to form. And here we are today. Irek's next question is, how do you choose which videos to cover? There are a lot of criteria for a video to be featured on ATA, but one of the most important parts is to have teachable moments throughout the encounter that will allow me to showcase certain legal topics. Some videos have very interesting storylines, but do not involve any legal concepts that I haven't already covered. Regardless, I encourage you all to submit your videos to ATA because you never know. Irek's last question is, do you have any interest or plans for covering non-American content? There are no current plans to expand ATA's coverage outside of the United States. My legal knowledge begins and ends with the American justice system, and it would be a disservice to the community to attempt to convey information that I do not thoroughly understand. All that said, I am interested in expanding ATA, but it will take some time before that's a legitimate possibility. These last few questions come from the Patreon supporter Dylan Conrad, and Dylan asks, have there been videos you have done in which new information came to light later where you had to change the original? Yes, there have been a few episodes of ATA that required an update or a correction after they were released. The corrections for any episode can be found in the description section. Dylan follows up this question with, if that ever happened in a significant way, would you go back and provide additional context? I am certainly open to the idea of a major correction if whenever was necessary, and I have already taken one video down to make significant changes to it. I am more than willing to admit if ATA gets something wrong or neglects to include the full context in an interaction, and I will always be transparent about any mistakes that I may have made. Well, that wraps up all the questions, and I plead the fifth from here out. Thanks for taking the time to watch this episode. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and tune in to the next episode, where I will be discussing the name John Lang and why I chose it as my alias. Again, I appreciate all of your support for growing this channel and growing ATA. And let me know if you guys have any ideas of some good content that could go on this channel. Until then, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.